Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
And today we are opening up a blueprint. But it's not a blueprint for a government or a software platform or an economic zone.
Right.
We're looking at the blueprint for the human soul. Or, well, to be more precise, the specific architecture of the modern Western mind.
And the source material for this deep dive it's fascinating, not just because of what it says, but because of exactly when it was said. We're looking at the meaning of happiness, the quest for freedom of the spirit in modern psychology, and the wisdom of the East by Alan Watts.
But we really need to be clear about who we are dealing with here.
Yeah, this isn't the...
Right, this isn't the Alan Watts that most people know from YouTube clips or, those lo-fi hip-hop tracks. This isn't the older, raspy-voiced, chuckling sage of the 1960s counterculture.
No, this book was published in 1940. Watts was only 24 years old. He was a kid, essentially. A prodigy, sure, but a very young man.
And context is absolutely everything for this one. Think about the year 1940. The Second World War has just erupted. The Blitz is about to start.
The world is quite literally tearing itself apart.
Exactly. Industrial violence is scaling up to a level humanity has never seen before.
It's the definition of a crisis. And right in the middle of this global catastrophe, while the house is essentially burning down, this young man sits down to write a book titled, well, The Meaning of Happiness.
It sounds almost offensive, doesn't it?
It sounds incredibly tone-deaf, like writing a book on flower arranging while you're sitting in a trench. It feels like he's totally bypassing the reality of the suffering around him.
That is exactly the initial reaction you might have. But the mission of this deep dive, and really the mission of the book itself, is to show that this is not a bypass at all. This is not a self-help book. It isn't offering comforting platitudes or telling you to just look on the bright side. Watts is arguing that the external war, the famine of the spirit, and the chronic anxiety of the modern individual, they are all products of a specific error in design.
So he's not ignoring the fire. He's analyzing why the house was built with highly flammable materials in the first place.
Yes, precisely. We are not reviewing a book today. We are analyzing a system. The central thesis is that we have built a civilization based on a crisis in perception, a fundamental misunderstanding of what the self is and how it relates to the universe.
Right.
And he argues that the war outside is really just a macrocosmic version of the war happening inside every individual Western mind.
The machinery of misery, so to speak.
That is a perfect way to put it. The machinery of misery.
And the paradox he highlights right at the start is one that I think every listener will recognize, even 80 years later, maybe especially 80 years later.
Oh, absolutely.
We have this immense material wealth, we have scientific mastery, we have machines, medicine, the ability to control our environment to a degree our ancestors couldn't even dream of.
We've conquered the outside world.
Right. We've won the game of survival, and yet we are anxious, we are chronically dissatisfied, we are terrified, we are, as he puts it, running wildly round in circles in frantic pursuit of our own selves.
And Watts posits that this anxiety isn't an accident. It's not a bug in the software.
It's a feature.
It is a structural outcome. The system is designed to produce this anxiety because the system is built on the premise that I, the conscious thinker, am a separate entity trapped inside a bag of skin fighting a hostile universe to acquire happiness.
Okay, let's stop there and really look at that, because that feels like the water we swim in. Of course I'm a separate entity. I'm me. You're you. I'm in here looking out at the world.
That feeling that I am in here and the world is out there, that is the primary system we are examining today. It is the modern psychological structure that alienates rational consciousness, the ego, from embodied and unconscious life, which we can call nature.
It feels objectively true to us.
It does. But Watts argues it is a construction, a design.
So let's unpack the design of this system. If this is an architecture, who is the architect? What are the load-bearing walls?
Watts identifies a convergence of three major historical forces that built the Western mind. We're looking at Renaissance humanism, Protestant moral legalism, and scientific rationalism.
Okay, that sounds like a college syllabus. Let's break those down. Why those three specifically?
Let's start with scientific rationalism because it gives us our primary operating tool. The core mechanism here is the machine metaphor.
The idea that the universe is just a giant clockwork mechanism.
Yes. Think about Newton. Think about the Industrial Revolution. Scientific rationalism works by dissection. To understand the universe, the intellect cuts it up into static, manageable blocks.
Right. We categorize.
We use logic and words to define things. This is a tree, that is a rock, this is a proton, that is an electron.
Which is incredibly useful. I mean, I need to know the difference between a rock and a sandwich if I want to survive.
Extremely useful.
Yeah.
We couldn't build bridges or cure diseases without it. But the error comes when we mistake the map for the territory. Watts argues that by treating the universe as a machine, a collection of separate parts interacting by cause and effect, we have become machine-like ourselves.
We start to view our own minds as engines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We view the body as a vehicle, a meat suit, and the mind as the driver. Listen to how we talk today. We talk about optimizing our performance. We talk about mental hygiene. We treat emotions like engine warning lights that need to be fixed so the machine can keep running efficiently.
I do this constantly. I'll say, I need to fix my sleep schedule, or I need to engineer my habits. It's all highly mechanical language.
And that mechanical language creates a split. It creates a civil war in the soul. Because if you are the driver and your emotions are the vehicle, then your emotions are something to be controlled, conquered, or suppressed.
It pits the rational me against the animal me.
Yes. But let's layer in the second force, Protestant moral legalism. This is crucial for understanding the anxiety component.
How does Protestantism fit into the machine?
Well, think about the shift from medieval Catholicism to Protestantism. In the medieval view, broadly speaking, you had the church. The church was a mediator. Grace was something you received through sacraments. But the Protestant ethic, specifically the Puritan strain, shifted the burden entirely onto the individual.
You are alone with God.
You are alone. And your salvation isn't guaranteed by the church. It's proven by your actions. It shifted the focus from being to doing. It turned life into a courtroom where you are constantly on the witness stand.
So every moment becomes a test. Am I doing enough? Am I working hard enough?
Exactly. It introduced a deep structural insecurity. You have to prove your worth through effort. This fused with the machine metaphor to create a psyche that is constantly monitoring itself, constantly judging itself, and constantly trying to work harder to justify its own existence.
And then Renaissance humanism.
That gave us the ego itself, the idea of the unique individual genius. The center of the universe is no longer God, it's man. Which sounds great on paper, but it places a crushing weight of responsibility on the individual I. If you are the center of the universe, you better figure everything out.
So you combine these three. You have a mind that thinks in separate blocks because of science, a soul that feels constantly judged and needs to prove itself through work because of moral legalism, and a belief that I am the lonely center of it all because of humanism.
And the result is the modern Westerner. An isolated, anxious machine, frantically running on a treadmill, trying to conquer nature and control itself.
That is a bleak picture, but it feels incredibly accurate.
It creates a state of perpetual internal conflict. But Watts does something brilliant here. He doesn't just say, civilization is bad, go back to the woods. He acknowledges that this split was necessary.
Necessary. How so?
He uses the parable of the prodigal son as an evolutionary map, and I think this is one of the most insightful parts of the whole analysis.
I loved this section. It's such a fresh take on a story you hear in Sunday school. Usually, it's just a moral lesson about forgiveness, but Watts turns it into a timeline of human consciousness.
Right. So let's walk through the map. First, you have the elder son, the one who stays home.
In Watts' reading, the elder son represents primitive man.
Correct. The primitive is unconsciously one with nature. He doesn't have this agonizing anxiety because he doesn't have a sharp, acute self-consciousness. He is part of the flow. He is in the Garden of Eden.
But he's also not fully realized. He's almost like a child or an animal. There's no distinct I to appreciate the garden.
Exactly. It's a state of unconscious unity. Then you have the prodigal son. He leaves home. He demands his inheritance. This is civilized man. This is us.
This is the moment we develop the ego.
We leave the unconscious union with nature. We develop this sharp, painful sense of I. We look in the mirror and say, that's me. We realize we are separate from the trees, separate from the animals, and separate from each other.
And that separation is terrifying.
It is terrifying, but it creates the possibility of freedom. It creates the possibility of love, of art, of science. Watts argues this stage is absolutely necessary. You cannot become a fully realized human without leaving the garden. You have to break the unity to find yourself.
But the prodigal son runs into trouble. The story says he wasted his substance in riotous living, and then there was a famine in the land.
That famine is the modern condition. Watts looks at 1940 and sees the famine everywhere. Spiritual hunger, war,
Yeah.
economic disorganization.
And he makes a point that the famine is artificial.
Yes, this is the systems part of the analysis. He notes that in the modern world, there is no actual scarcity of wealth or resources. We have the technology to feed everyone. We have the capacity for abundance. The famine is a result of human stupidity, as he calls it.
It's a result of the isolation. The prodigal son is so scared, so separate that he hoards, he fights. He creates scarcity out of abundance because he thinks he has to protect his little bag of skin against the world.
This is the peak of the crisis. We are lonely, starving, and fighting, surrounded by food. We just can't figure out how to share.
And the return. In the Bible story, the son finally goes back home.
The return is the critical system update. And this is where people really get confused. They think Watts and other Eastern philosophers are saying we should go back to being the elder son.
Right, the whole return to nature, rewild yourself movement.
Right. But you can't. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't unknow that you're an individual. If you try to just act primitive, you're just a civilized person play acting.
So the goal isn't to regress.
No. The goal is to go forward, to return to the Father, to nature, but with the full consciousness you gained by leaving. It is a conscious reunion. It's knowing you are one with the universe, but feeling that unity with the sharp clarity of an awakened mind.
Okay, so that's the map. Primitive unity, then painful separation, which is us, and then conscious unity. But the problem, or the design flaw we're living in, is that we are stuck in step 2, and the tools we are using to try to get happy are actually keeping us stuck there.
Which brings us to the incentive architecture. How does this machine motivate us? It uses the carrot and the stick.
The donkey and the carrot. Watts is very specific about this image. You have a donkey, you strap a stick to its collar, and you dangle a carrot in front of its nose. The donkey runs to catch the carrot.
But the faster the donkey runs, the faster the carrot moves. Why?
Because the carrot is attached to the donkey.
This is the perfect metaphor for the modern pursuit of happiness.
You know, it's actually written into the U.S. Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are legally codified to chase the carrot.
And notice the phrasing there. Pursuit. In our current system, happiness is viewed as an object. It is a result to be attained in the future through action.
It's always conditional. If I get this job, I will be happy. If I find a partner, I will be happy. If I lose 10 pounds, I will be happy.
It's strictly future-oriented.
Yeah.
And that structure guarantees failure. Because the act of striving for happiness reinforces the feeling that you lack happiness.
Wait, let's dig into that, because that's counterintuitive for a lot of people. If I'm hungry, looking for food works. If I'm cold, looking for a coat works. Why doesn't looking for happiness work?
Because hunger and cold are physical states related to external objects. Happiness, in the sense Watts means a deep sense of union and peace, is a structural state of the self. If you are pursuing it, you are defining yourself as the person who does not have it. You are emphasizing the distance between you and the goal.
So the striving creates the gap.
The striving is the gap.
This leads to what Watts calls the vicious circle. And I really want to slow down here because I think this is the technical core of the book. If we don't understand this loop, we don't understand anything.
Agreed. The vicious circle is the mechanism of misery. It is a perfectly designed feedback loop.
Let's use a concrete example from the text. He mentions insomnia. I think that's perfect because everyone has been there.
Excellent example. Let's trace the loop. Step 1. You are lying in bed. You are awake. That is the raw fact. Step 2. The ego, the controller, notices this and judges it. This is bad. I have a meeting tomorrow. I must sleep.
Right. So now there is a problem to be solved.
Step 3. You exert effort. You try to force sleep. You count sheep. You relax your toes. You check the clock. You get frustrated. But what is the nature of that effort?
It's vigilance. It's activity.
Exactly. You are vigilantly trying to let go. You are actively trying to be passive.
Which wakes me up even more.
Step 4. The effort creates tension. The tension makes you more awake. The ego sees you are still awake, panics more, and tries harder.
I really need to sleep now. Relax, damn it.
And now you are wide awake, heart pounding, completely miserable. The effort to cure the problem is the problem.
Okay, that's incredibly clear for sleep. But how does it apply to happiness or anxiety?
It's the exact same mechanic. Let's say you feel socially anxious. You go to a party. You feel a tightness in your chest. The ego says, this is bad. I shouldn't be anxious. People will think I'm weird. So you try to suppress the anxiety. You try to act natural. You monitor your own voice to make sure it doesn't shake.
Which makes me incredibly self-conscious. Now I'm not even listening to the conversation. I'm just listening to myself.
And that self-consciousness is the anxiety. So you get more anxious. Then you judge yourself for being anxious. Why can't I just be normal? Now you are anxious about your anxiety.
It's a total spiral.
Watts uses some really visceral analogies here. He says, it is like trying to kiss your own lips or bite your own teeth.
Or lift yourself up by your own belt.
I love the belt analogy. You can stand in a bucket and pull on your belt until your veins pop. You will not levitate. Why?
Because I'm the thing I'm trying to lift. The force and the object are the same.
Exactly. The ego is trying to act upon itself. But the ego is the action. You cannot jump over your own shadow.
Okay, so here is where the smart listener, and frankly the desperate listener, tries to find a loophole. They say, okay, I get it. Fighting causes the loop. So I will stop fighting. I will accept my anxiety. I will surrender.
The most dangerous trap of all. Watts calls this the infinite regression. If you say, I'm going to accept my anxiety so that it will go away, what are you actually doing?
I'm still trying to make it go away. I'm just using acceptance as the tool instead of suppression.
Exactly. You haven't stopped chasing the carrot. You've just painted the carrot a different color. You're using spiritual acceptance as a strategy for the ego to get what it wants.
So you get into this meta loop. I'm anxious. I accept it. Wait, I'm still anxious. I must not be accepting hard enough. I need to accept my non-acceptance.
And down you go. The system outcome is a feedback loop. Anxiety leads to effort. Effort leads to more anxiety. And because our culture tells us try harder is the solution to everything, we spin in this circle until we have a total breakdown.
Let's look at the broader structural outcomes of this. Because when you have millions of people trapped in this feedback loop, it doesn't just ruin their day, it ruins the world.
It creates a civilization of alienation and repression. Watts talks about the return of the repressed. This is a crucial concept for understanding the violence of the 20th century and the 21st for that matter.
He connects this to the history of banishing demons, right?
Yes. In the medieval view, the world was full of gods, demons, and spirits. The woods were haunted. The storms were angry gods. Science and Protestantism came along and said, nonsense, the world is dead matter. There are no demons out there. There are spirits.
Only mechanics, only atoms bumping into atoms.
We cleaned up the world. We sanitized reality. But Watts argues, and he's drawing heavily on Carl Jung here, that the demons didn't disappear. They moved inside.
Moves to the unconscious.
By suppressing the irrational, the emotional, the instinctual, by labeling them as bad or primitive or unscientific, we didn't eliminate them. We just lost our conscious relationship with them. We locked them in the basement.
And when you lock something powerful in the basement and ignore it, it tends to get angry.
And eventually, it kicks the door down. Watts explicitly points to Nazi psychology here. Remember, he's writing in 1940. He's watching the Nazis march across Europe. He calls Nazism rationalization run wild.
That's interesting because usually we think of the Nazis as just purely irrational monsters.
They were possessed by irrational forces, by the shadow, but they used the tools of rationality to execute it. They used bureaucracy, industrial efficiency, and pseudoscientific race theory.
Right.
Watts argues that because modern man has denied his own irrational nature, he becomes highly susceptible to mass psychosis. The suppressed forces burst out, and the intellect, that clever machine, immediately invents rational reasons for the insanity.
We are doing this for the purity of the race. We are doing this for the fatherland. We are just following orders.
Exactly. The intellect is essentially a lawyer. It will justify whatever the unconscious drives it to do. If you don't know your own demons, they will own you. Watts notes the supreme irony here. We live in an age of supreme science and logic, yet we behave with supreme stupidity. War and starvation in the midst of plenty. That is the structural outcome of overvaluing the conscious intellect and repressing everything else.
There's another outcome he mentions, which is less violent but deeply relatable to anyone listening who feels a vague sense of emptiness, the feeling of being a hole in the handkerchief.
It's a haunting image. He says the ego, this separate I, feels like a hole in the fabric of the universe. We feel empty. We feel fundamentally insufficient. So what do? We try to fill that emptiness by acquiring things from the outside. Money, status, love, experiences, new cars.
We are trying to patch the hole.
But we are cutting out patches from other parts of the handkerchief to fill the hole. We're destroying the world to build up the ego. And it never works. Because you are the hole. As long as you define yourself as a separate, empty vessel that needs filling, you will remain empty. You can throw the whole world into that hole, and it will never be enough.
Before we move to the solution or the non-solution, I guess we have to touch on a specific danger Watts warns about. Because he's drawing on Eastern philosophy, and he sees a massive risk when Westerners start playing with these ideas. He calls it spiritual inflation.
This is the trap of misunderstanding. In Eastern philosophy, specifically Vedanta, there's the phrase taptamam asi, you are that, meaning you are the universe, you are God, you are the ultimate reality playing a game of hide and seek.
Which sounds great. I am the Almighty. It's the ultimate ego trip.
And that is exactly the disaster. If you
Yeah.
take a Western ego, which is built on separation, control, and pride, and you tell it you are God, it doesn't dissolve the ego. It inflates it. It blows it up like a balloon.
So instead of realizing you are one with everything and feeling humble, you think, I am the boss of everything.
Watts is very firm on this. You cannot bypass the famine stage. You cannot just jump to, I am God. You must first accept the division and the pain of the ego before you can realize the unity. If you skip the suffering, you just become a megalomaniac. You become a spiritual narcissist.
So let's pivot to persistence. Why does the system stick around? We've identified it makes us miserable, it creates wars, it creates feedback loops of anxiety. Why don't we just stop?
Because the system has incredibly powerful institutional reinforcement. It's baked into our religion, our language, and our science.
We touched on religion, but let's talk about language. This one breaks my brain a little bit. He says we can't even speak without reinforcing the error.
Look at our basic grammar. Subject, verb, object, I hit the ball, I feel sad. Our grammar forces us to divide the world into an actor and an action. It creates the illusion that I am a static thing that is separate from the hitting or the feeling.
But is that true? Can there be a hitter without a hit? Can there be a thinker without a thought?
Watts and many Eastern traditions would say no. They are one process. Thinking is happening, hitting is happening, but our language cuts them in two. It hypnotizes us into believing there is a ghost in the machine pulling the levers. If you speak English, you are programmed for duality.
And then there's the philosophy of as if. This is how we handle the cognitive dissonance of science.
Right. Science tells us we are determined mechanisms. Biology and physics say our actions are caused by prior events. Your brain chemistry determines your mood. Your genetics determine your temperament. You are a machine.
But we don't feel like machines. We feel like we have free will.
So we live by as if. We know we are machines, but we act as if we're free agents. We live in a state of cognitive schizophrenia. This tension keeps the ego running because the ego is terrified of its own non-existence. It creates complications, drama, and struggle just to feel important, just to prove I am here, I am doing something.
So we have the diagnosis. The machine is broken, or rather it's working perfectly to produce misery. Now Watts brings in the structural correctives, and he looks east to Buddhism, Taoism, and Vedanta.
And this is vital, he frames them not as exotic spiritualities, but as psychologies.
Empirical psychologies, not believe this dogma, but try this experiment.
Yes. Western observers often dismiss Eastern traditions as passive or fatalistic, but Watts says they are systems patches. They are alternative system logics designed for breaking the vicious circle.
He tells a story about a reviewer who critiqued his book. The reviewer said, "The mountain has labored and brought forth a mouse," meaning Watts wrote this big, complex history of the mind, and the conclusion was just, accept what is. The reviewer thought it was totally trivial.
And Watts' rebuttal is the pivot point of the whole deep dive. He says the reviewer was mistaken in one slight respect. There was no mouse.
Okay, I have to push back here. That sounds like a cop-out. I read a whole book, I do all the psychological analysis, and the answer is, there is no mouse. Nothing.
Yeah.
That feels like a trick.
It is a trick. But that's the point. Why does it feel like a cheat to you?
Because I wanted a solution. I wanted the key. I wanted the prize at the bottom of the cereal box.
You wanted the carrot. And that wanting is the wall you're hitting. Watts is trying to show you that looking for a prize, looking for the mouse, is exactly why you're miserable. The realization is not that you catch the mouse. The realization is that there's nothing to grasp.
Explain the paper analogy. I think that helps visualize this no mouse concept much better than just saying nothing.
Watts asks us to look at a printed book. When you read, you look at the words. You focus on the black ink, the shapes, the meaning. You completely ignore the paper. The paper is the background. It is the nothing that allows the something to exist.
All right, if there were no paper, there would be no words.
In this analogy, the words are the ego, the specific forms, the events of your life. The paper is reality, Brahman. The Tao, we are so focused on the words, on fixing the words, moving the words, polishing the words, that we cannot see the paper.
But we are the paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot grasp the paper because you are it. You cannot see your own eyes because they are what you are seeing with. The struggle to find happiness is the eye trying to look at itself, is the fire trying to burn itself. It's impossible.
So the Eastern corrective, specifically Wu Wei in Taoism, is about stopping the struggle.
Wu Wei. It's often translated as non-action, which sounds like laziness. It sounds like sitting on the couch doing nothing. But structurally, it means non-forcing. It is the realization that the force moving the universe and the force that is you are the exact same force.
You gave an analogy earlier about a whirlpool.
Right. Imagine a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool has a shape. It has a location. You can name it. Here is the whirlpool. But if the whirlpool tries to grab the water, if it tries to separate itself from the river, it fails because it is the water. Wu Wei is the whirlpool, realizing it is the river. It doesn't have to push the water. It just flows.
This redefines nirvana, too. I always thought nirvana was floating on a cloud after you die, or disappearing into a void.
Watts tears that down. He cites the Mahayana view. This life and death world is nirvana.
Wait, this world? With the traffic and the taxes and the anxiety and the war?
This messy, painful, beautiful world is it. The only thing separating us from freedom is the concept that we need to be set free. The only thing separating us from nirvana is the effort to attain nirvana.
Because the effort implies you aren't there. Okay, so let's get practical. I'm stuck in the vicious circle. I'm anxious. I'm trying to accept it, but I'm failing. I'm looping. What is the corrective mechanism? What do I actually do? Watts talks about total acceptance, but we already said acceptance can be a trap if I'm doing it to get a result.
This is the nuance that saves us. You must accept the conflict itself.
Break that down.
If you are anxious, accept the anxiety. But if you try to accept it and fail, if you find yourself fighting it, accept the failure. Accept that you are a bad acceptor, accept that you're anxious and you hate it.
So I stopped trying to be the spiritual hero who loves their anxiety.
Yes. Stop trying to split yourself into the good me who is accepting and the bad me who is anxious. Just be the person who hates their anxiety. Watts says you have to let the knot tighten. The knot. He says the vicious circle is a knot. Most of us try to untie it by pulling, but pulling just tightens it. He says, let it tighten, pull as hard as you can, panic, freak out, struggle. Eventually, the knot tightens until it snaps.
It snaps.
It snaps because you hit the wall. You realize deeply and truly in your bones that there's absolutely nothing you can do to save yourself.
Oh.
You realize you cannot lift yourself by your belt. And in that moment of total defeat, when the ego finally gives up because it sees the impossibility of the task, the struggle stops.
You stop running after the carrot because you realize you can never catch it.
And when you stop running, you realize you're already there. You realize the mouse was never there. The problem was an illusion created by the solution.
So let's bring this all together. We've looked at the machinery, the history, the trap, and the release. So if we look at all of this, the vicious circle, the machine logic, the failed pursuit of happiness, what is the crisis in perception here?
The crisis is a case of mistaken identity on a cosmic scale. First, clarify the misperception. We perceive happiness as an acquisition, something you get, and the ego as a controller, something that does the getting. Second, the obscured structural layer. The reality is that the ego is just a function of the total environment. It's a wave thinking it is separate from the ocean. The wave tries to grab the water to make itself safe. It's absurd. The wave is the water. We are obscuring the paper by focusing entirely on the words.
And surface interpretations fail, self-help, moralizing, striving, because they try to use the ego to cure the ego?
You cannot use the tool to fix the tool. You cannot use the intellect to solve the problem of the intellect's own limitations. The crisis in perception is resolved not by doing something new, but by seeing clearly. It is a shift from I am a stranger in the world to I am the world experiencing itself. The crisis is the painful birth pangs of this higher consciousness.
And that shift changes everything. Not because the world changes, the war is still happening, the bills are still due, but because the war inside stops.
The civil war stops. The famine ends. Not because you found food, but because you realized you were never hungry in the way you thought you were. You realize you are the food, the eater, and the eating.
I want to leave our listener with that final image Watts offers regarding the non-existent mouse. We spend our lives running in circles, terrified, trying to find ourselves, trying to capture that mouse. We build elaborate traps. We study mouse-catching sciences. We pray to mouse-catching gods. But the moment you stop running, the moment you really look, you realize the mouse was never there. The mountain labored, and the result was silence.
And in that silence, the paper is finally revealed.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter, visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.